Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here. My name is Kevin Dean. I'm the president and CEO of Tennessee Nonprofit Network. We're really excited to be partnering with the Tennessee Department of Human Services to let y'all know about this grant opportunity. We obviously have a big interest in this, since we have over 100 people in the room already, and we have 300 and something people registered for this session. So while everybody's talking, please be sure to keep your phone or your computer on mute. There's nothing worse than having to stop in the middle of a presentation to mute somebody. We also have a few things we want to talk about before we get started. First off, if you are not a member of Tennessee Nonprofit Network and you are a 501c3 organization in the state of Tennessee or serving communities in the state of Tennessee, you need to be a member. The great news is that it's free. We're one of the only state associations in the country that offers free membership to all nonprofits, 501c3 nonprofits in the state. So it's very low risk to join. You just have to have your 501c3 status already. You have to be in compliance with the state of Tennessee and the IRS, and you're good to go. So please go to our website. Dorian has put a link in the chat. If you're not a member right now, you can join right now while you're listening. The second opportunity we have available, we have a big grant from Fidelity Charitable Catalyst Fund that is funding two major statewide learning cohorts. One's about volunteer management. One is about fundraising. So if you're struggling with either of those, Dorian just put the link in the chat. Learn more about that at the link that Dorian put in there. All you have to do is apply. The application is now due on June 30th. So that's right around the corner. But you can apply for one or both of those cohorts. You can only be in one. But with that, you'll get a free conference registration for our Tennessee Nonprofit Conference October 3rd. You'll come to a pre-convening on October 2nd. In Memphis, we're going to pay for everything, pay for your hotel, for your travel, all of that. You'll get free pre-conference registration, free conference registration. It is the biggest nonprofit conference in the state of Tennessee, as well as one of the biggest conferences in the South, nonprofit conferences, that is, in the South. So it's definitely worth attending. You'll also get access to our online curriculum. You'll have access to the peer learning support, peer learning meetings every month to go over the curriculum. And then you'll also have access to free access on demand to nonprofit consultants who work in volunteer management and fundraising to help you through your fundraising or volunteer management struggles. And you also get a completion grant once you complete the evaluation. So it's about a $10,000 per organization grant, non-monetary grant. So please apply for those. If you want to learn more, feel free to email us or let us know if you have questions. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Natalie Jones, our Director of Advocacy and Research, to do some introductions.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this Tuesday afternoon. I've been calling it Monday all day, but we are very excited to have two individuals from Tennessee Department of Human Services. We have Callon Schmid, who is the Assistant Commissioner there at TDHS, as well as Suzanne Carr, the Senior Policy Advisor there as well. So both these ladies will be sharing just different grant opportunities that are available, as well as some of the backgrounds of these exciting programs. So Callon, Suzanne, I will pass it over to y'all, but thank you so much for joining. Oh, and one last thing, since we do have quite a crowd with us today, we do welcome any and all questions that you may have, but please put them in the chat. The TNN team will be collecting those throughout the presentation, and we will lift those up to make sure that they are answered there at the end. So thank y'all, and back to y'all. Sorry about that.
Okay, great. As I'm jumping in, I want to just say I am Callon Schmid. I'm the Department of Human Services Assistant Commissioner for External Affairs. I wanted to just introduce us briefly before I let Suzanne go into some grants. My role at the department is I oversee our communications team, our legislative team, and our customer service team. And I take credit for other people's work. So Suzanne, if you want to introduce yourself, because I take credit for most of your work, and then go into a little bit of an overview of the department, I will say that I've been getting some electrical work done today. And as y'all can see behind me, Suzanne, I'm going to let you take it away and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Callon. Hi, everyone. I'm Suzanne Carr. I'm the Senior Policy Advisor here at the department. Callon is lying. She does not take credit for my work. She helps dodge any problems for us so that me and my team can do our work. My team handles all of our big P policy, so not little P policy. If you guys interact with a lot of our programs, they've got, tons and tons of policies. Those do not come up to us. We are handling commissioners' overarching vision, things with our sister agencies like the Department of Ed and Department of Labor, and big initiatives that you may have heard of, such as the TANF Opportunity Act pilot program, some of our larger work with childcare, things like that. So my division kind of serves as a consultant for our program areas and special projects. And like Callum mentioned, we've got a lot of divisions at the department. And so you may not always be aware that you're interacting with the same agency when you're talking to some of our folks. So real quick, I'll run through all the programs that we cover. This is not meant to be an exhaustive list because I'm absolutely sure that I will miss some. But our big major program areas, and especially the ones that our customers and the folks that you serve are most aware of, we've got our Family Assistance Division. They cover SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, the TANF program, the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. That block grant serves both our Families First program, which is our cash assistance that, historically known as that cash welfare benefit. And then it also funds a lot of our grant programs, which we're getting to. Family Assistance also now has the PEBT program for school-age children post the pandemic. So then we also have our Child Care and Community Services program. That program area licenses childcare across the state. We also have a lot of supports for childcare agencies. We have a couple grant programs that they can access. And we have the Smart Steps program, which assists working families and low-income families with childcare payment assistance. Then we have the Child Support Program, where our agency helps folks establish paternity and get child support set up. We can also help with modifications of those orders and various other programs helping fathers, non-custodial parents find work and other services so that they can then make their child support payments. Then we've got our Rehabilitation Services Division. The biggest program in this division is the Vocational Rehabilitation Program. That program helps individuals with disabilities find employment, and it can support any and all types of persons with disabilities. So whether that be physical, intellectual, developmental, we can also assist with any type of job that they are seeking, any training they need, any school they need, any supportive services, vehicles, things like that. Anything that an individual with a disability needs to go to work, our VR division is there to help them. And then lastly, our last major program is Disability Determination Services. This is a partnership we have with the Social Security Administration, where we help do the medical determinations for folks who are seeking Social Security disability. And so that is a very, very, very fast overview of the programs the department has. Any questions about any smaller programs or anything specific about any of those programs, drop them in the chat and we can go back to that towards the end. But now we'll jump to what I know everybody is really here for, which is our 2 grant opportunities that are currently open right now. And so first, we've got the community grants. These are a little bit broader. They're funded by TANF, so that block grant that I mentioned earlier. So the requirements to be funded with that block grant, you have to be serving low-income families with minor children and meet one of the 4 purposes of TANF. Other than that, pretty broad. These have been referred to in the past as our 2-gen grants. Now they're known as community grants. This year, there's $5 million available. I know that we've heard a lot that is a smaller amount than there has been in years past. If you're not familiar, we had legislation passed a few years ago called the TANF Opportunity Act. That bill said that the amount available for community grants will be the amount that the department did not spend of the block grant the previous year. So it's an amount that is going to fluctuate year to year. And I would just say that I expect it to be lower than it has been in the past years going forward. So that would just be something to keep in mind, that it is probably going to be a smaller amount than in years past. Those grants are open right now. They're open for applications now until July 10th at 5 p.m. There won't be any extensions, so please get your applications in before then. Historically, in the past, we funded lots of different wraparound programs. It can be things that are assisting parents with going to work, interventions for low-income children. We've funded, trying to think of specifics without calling out specific organizations, which is escaping me right now. But again, any of those wraparound types of services that help low-income needy families with minor children typically fall under TANF. If you've got any, specific questions about the types of services that can be funded, we're happy to answer those as well. And with that, we'll go to the next opportunity we have open, which this is a new opportunity. Callon, are you going to take it?
I'll jump in here. And
Okay.
isn't it right when you start a call that's when everything happens? So hopefully I'll be quiet in our presentation from here on out. So for those who don't know Commissioner Carter, he is Suzanne's and my boss at the department. He's worked in the human services space for 30 some odd years. And this is something that was on our radar previously, but Commissioner Carter has really elevated the conversations around fatherhood in the state of Tennessee. And we are super excited that this year, last year we hosted a fatherhood conference. It was a statewide conference here in Nashville, and we brought people together and really started a lot of work. We did an environmental scan. We did surveys. We had a group come in and help us talk to folks out doing this work. And then this year, actually just a couple of weeks ago, we announced our fatherhood grants to go live, that application period. I forgot to put this on there, but it is also $5 million total. And it is, the max liability is $500,000 over 2 years. So there is a limit on that one. But it's a very similar structure to the community grants because it is also funded by TANF at this time, that large block grant that we received. So I wanted to make sure that folks knew that on the front end, because the important piece of that is that we are looking for people who are providing direct services in the fatherhood space. So that could be, again, like Suzanne, I don't want to call out any specific organizations, but that could be mentorship programs, that could be parenting classes, that could be helping with different fatherhood expenses, things like that. This again, this is the first time that we're doing this. We're really excited. So we're excited to see the grant applications that we receive. This is a smaller window of time than the community grants. This application period closes June 30th at 5 p.m. Also, same thing, no extensions will be granted. So make sure you note that June 30th date. And for both of these grants, I know y'all are probably saying, I have so many questions. How do I'm sure you all have filled out multiple grant applications, but I've never filled out a DHS specific one. We have on our website on both of these pages, we will send this PowerPoint to the group, but if you click the link on either one of these slides, it'll take you to the application landing page for both of these grant opportunities. And we have videos on how to apply. We have all of the documentation that you'll need to have to make your application complete. So again, we're really excited about this fatherhood grant. We hope it's not the only thing you see coming to us. And that would be.
And I'll just add a little bit to what Callon said. That application guide has all the info of things we've mentioned, the definition of low income, the specifics of things you need to include with your application, budget documentations, different forms that need to be filled out. So just be sure, when you look at those, make sure you've included everything. That is a way that a lot of people sometimes unfortunately get knocked out, is by not including all the necessary documentation, all the necessary, registrations with the state, things like that, that we have to have. So just be sure if you are interested, to go ahead and take a look at those application guides and be sure you can get all of that info together in time before the deadline. Because unfortunately, some of that is stuff that you probably can't get at 4:30 on the afternoon that the application is due. And yeah, and so with that, and I think Callon said this, but just to be sure, the fatherhood grants are also funded with TANF. So they do have to meet that low income definition as well. But they can serve non-custodial parents. So, they do have to have children, but they can be, the non-custodial parent, which is of course a lot of times the father in those situations. And that way we can, serve fathers and help them get back in touch with their families. So anything else, Callon? I think we are ready to knock out some questions.
Yeah, we're open for questions. Again, we really want to thank y'all for listening to us, being engaged, and most importantly, being partners with us. These emails that you see on the screen, my email's the first one, Suzanne's is the second one. If you have a specific fatherhood grant question, that fatherhood.tdhs@tn.gov, that goes directly to the team. And then obviously the email's a little old, but the 2Gen email, that's for the community grant. So specific questions can be sent to them. So that we'll be happy to help. But we just want to say thank you for being willing to listen to us ramble, hearing my dog bark, and also being partners with us and helping serve Tennesseans. This is something that it's challenging work, and we are really appreciative of all of the community partners we have in it. So with that, I will stop talking and take questions.
Always the joy of hosting these things virtually on what will happen in the background.
Yeah.
So we did have 2 quick questions that popped up. The first one was a question around, can we apply for both of these opportunities or just one?
There is nothing that is barring any organization from applying for both. And just, they are coming from both TANF funded. So no, the fatherhood has that fatherhood focus, and community grants is a bit broader.
I will say you can apply for both. You can't receive both for the exact same program. So say your organization is running a fatherhood program and potentially a different type of program. You could receive potentially, I'm not saying anyone would, but you could potentially receive both for those separate programs, but you couldn't receive both grants for the exact same program.
Gotcha. Okay. And then for the $500,000 maximum liability, was that for the community grant, the fatherhood grant, or both of them?
That is just for the fatherhood grant. We did put a cap on that one.
And while we don't have a cap on community grants, I would just, remind everyone that the total amount available is still $5 million.
And then what is the effective date of the grant? I'm assuming this will be for the fatherhood grant. And then when would successful grantors be notified?
That is a to be determined question. I can say that we are modeling this after the community grant process. So if you've interacted with us in that space, we try to notify individuals sometime in the fall, and then, the contracting with the state, having all those pieces. But that'll be one that I'll probably have to get back with a more firm time frame to you all on, unless Suzanne knows.
No, we typically don't have a firm timeline on when we announce those winners, because it typically depends on how many applications we receive and the process to rate and review all of those and select the recipients.
Perfect. And then for the low income families criteria, do we need to serve families that meet one of the criteria or all of them?
Just one of them. So like, for example, if they're receiving SNAP or Medicaid, they don't need to be receiving both. They can, but just one will suffice.
Perfect. And is the community grant a 1-year grant or is a multi-year grant?
It can be, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Callon, we're not doing any more than 2 years. It can be 1 or 2 years, depending on whatever you put in your proposal.
That's my understanding as well.
Perfect. Okay, so this is a little bit of a specific one. So we serve people who are low income, but we do not do means test or ask for annual income. Is that a requirement in order to determine TANF eligibility?
So when if you receive a community grant, you would have to keep documentation of how you have determined that these families are low income. It will become an audit issue, frankly. So yes, you do have to keep some type of documentation, whether it be their SNAP eligibility, their low income housing eligibility, whatever criteria you use to determine them low income for the purposes of the grant, you do have to keep documentation on how you determined that they were eligible.
Good old audits.
Hmm.
Okay.
Everyone's favorite.
Yeah, everyone loves a good documentation for practicants audits. So my grant team keeps asking me if we are supposed to do anything different or if this is a renewal for the community grant. So I guess for those who have received a community grant previously, is this a renewal or is this a completely new process?
So we don't do renewals. We never have. A lot of people have been lucky to continue receiving them, but it is always a new application. And so thus subject to, potentially not receiving it because we review and rate everyone's applications with, fresh eyes every application round. So don't necessarily need to do anything different if your proposal and program is the same, but there's never a guarantee of funding.
Perfect. And what is the maximum that can be received for each of these grants?
Callon, I'll let you take that.
Again, for the fatherhood grant, it is 500,000 max liability over a 2-year period. So 250 per year, 250,000 per year. So that is the limit for fatherhood.
And like we mentioned earlier, we don't have a limit for community grants other than I will again emphasize, the total amount available is only 5 million.
Well, kind of on that same note, next question was, is there an estimated range of total awards for the community grant? So 5 million in total, but how many awards approximately?
We don't have an estimate. It'll just depend on, the strength of applications we receive. And once those are, ranked and graded.
And to follow up on that with one of these questions, so what I'm hearing clearly is there is not a cap on any of the grant request amounts, but just keeping in mind total limits for both of those grants.
Well, for community grants, like Callon's mentioned, there is a cap for fatherhood grants. Those
Gotcha.
are 500,000.
500,000 for fatherhood, no cap on community, just that total 5 million.
Right. So you could, in theory, request 750,000 for community and potentially be awarded that. It just depends. And I can say all this, Callon and I are not the ones who rate and review your application. So we're just throwing out numbers. This is not, please don't take any of this as advice on numbers to submit or propose. We're not going to be the ones reviewing them.
That's someone else's very fun job reading.
Yeah, that is someone else's very fun job this year. We are just here to share the word about it.
Perfect. For those, will they be reimbursement grants?
So both of them are reimbursement grants. Anything funded with TANF is a reimbursement grant. So that is something your organization will need to prepare for and be able to, fund those things until you submit invoices and get reimbursed.
It's been a hot topic around the TNN network recently. So thank y'all for that. Okay, let's see here. So we've already confirmed, but just confirming again that income documentation verification is required to prove that the families we serve meet the low income threshold for audits.
Eligibility documentation is required. So that is not necessarily like bank accounts or pay stubs. It can be things like, SNAP or Medicaid. And we're getting a little in the weeds. For more specifics on that, I'd have to get with my program team. But again, it's eligibility for the program. How are they meeting that low income definition? It can be income, but it can also be qualifying for any of those programs listed.
And then bouncing back to the Fatherhood grant, is that a multi-year grant?
It can be up to 2 years.
Up to 2 years. So there's there's a question that I hope makes sense to you all. So is the fundraising grant for those not in the 250K and above bracket?
That might be our cohort. That might be the fundraising cohort, because we have the $250,000 threshold for, yes. So we do have a threshold for $250,000 for our cohort. And there is some flexibility in that, but you would need to have donors already, or a donors prospect list in order to qualify under 250,000. Feel free to email me directly or email one of our staff members for more information on that.
Got it. Phew. Answered that one. Okay, so bouncing back to the community grants, just to be clear, the 5 million is not the total award per organization. That is the total amount available.
That is the total pot, if that's an easy way to think of it, available statewide.
Perfect. Reimbursements, yes, this is a reimbursement style grant.
Yes.
And then the award determination date and award, I think we've kind of talked about that being up for determination still.
Yeah, it's TBD depending on, how many applications we get, how long it takes our team to review them, those type of things. Because just a little insight, we do, pull folks from across our department to have a wide range of perspectives. So those people also have, full-time other jobs to look at. And then of course we have to review everyone's applications for all the mandatory requirements. Like I mentioned earlier, all the forms that have to be filled out. Do you have all the necessary registrations, those type of things, which takes our team a little bit of time for every application.
And
Oh,
sorry, give a little bit of scale for people to understand on why we don't give that. As Suzanne just said, there's a lot. To give you all a number, last year we had 89 organizations apply, which is really exciting for the community grant. So we want to make sure that every single application gets a thorough review. So that's why we can't give you a firm timeline.
makes sense. Another question around types of programming. So does a workforce development program qualify for the community grant, even if they don't address family life or parenting, but assuming that parents just happen to be a part of this workforce development program?
Yes, if they are serving parents of minor children and helping them get back into the workforce, get job training, job preparation, anything like that, that would meet one of the purposes of TANF.
Excellent. Okay. And then do you offer one-on-one meetings to discuss project ideas to help determine if our ideas are a good fit for the program and offer feedback on how to strengthen the proposals?
We do not offer those while the grants are open. Unfortunately, I think that would become mine and Callon's full-time job if we did that, if we were meeting with anyone who was interested, and especially offering advice on specific proposals to potentially, that would be, a potential advantage to one applicant over another. So unfortunately, we can't do that, Callon. I'm not sure if there's any more you want to add to that. We do, I will say, just, we do meet with folks throughout the year, but not on that specific level.
That's exactly how I would have said it.
Spectacular. And is there a projection on how long the community grant will be available?
So that might be a question more about, I think I'm interpreting it correctly. So the community grants, just to give a little bit of historical context, they were established through the TANF Opportunity Act that passed in 2021. It was a piece of department legislation, and it takes, as Suzanne described at the beginning, we get 191 million every year from the federal government for our TANF block grant. And with that TANF block grant, we use it for a variety of purposes. Most importantly, I shouldn't say most importantly, but the federal government views the most important assistance that we provide as that direct assistance to families. So that can range, it just is how many people are on our rolls getting that monthly allocation based on their household size. Then on top of that, we have other TANF partnerships, and then whatever we don't use of that 191 million for the year rolls over into the community grant bucket. And then that's when it is, I'm sometimes not the most eloquent. I'm like, that's when it's up for grabs. So that's when we notify everybody and say, hey, we've got 5 million available this year. And that was what we didn't use of last year's grant. So that's where the amount comes from. So it is in law to have community grants, and it just depends on the amounts fluctuating each year.
Yeah. So in theory, 1 year we could have 10 million. This year we have 5 million. It could vary. And I think I interpreted the question the other way. So I'm thinking if you receive a grant this year, like we mentioned earlier, it can be up to 2 years. So whatever funding you received would be for 2 years. And then you would need to, apply again.
So hopefully one way or another, we answered the question.
Yeah, hopefully we got that. Got the
like
question. If we didn't, chat us again. We'll figure it out.
Multiple angles. I love it. Then let's see here. In the case where an agency has a couple different branches of their organization, does the agency have to apply as a whole, or could their, for example, maybe their housing division apply for one and then their children's services division apply for another one? Or do they all have to be under one agency? Hopefully I understood that question correctly.
Yeah, I don't think we have any specifics against, for different programs under an agency. That's something, that one I may have to double check, with our specific community grants team. I don't believe we have any ban per se on, multiple grants, but I do know, I will say, just from an audit perspective, if you were to receive multiple, it is on the agency to keep very impeccable documentation and keep clear that there was no double billing for the same participant under multiple grants. So that just kind of, from a process perspective, could get tricky.
Definitely fair enough. And then do direct services all have to let me back up. Do direct services have to already be in place, or can these grants be used for new programming?
They can be used for new programming.
Awesome. Room for innovation and new thought. Then let's see here. So there's another question that kind of deals with eligibility, especially around free and reduced lunch. I guess they primarily serve young people in a system that always provides free and reduced lunch, regardless of if you can or can't. Is that too in the weeds, or is there other elements?
I can't answer that one. You would have to still show how they are that particular, sorry, there's a fly in front of my face. You would have to show how that particular family is meeting the low income definition. Community eligible would not be enough.
Got it. And is this award kind of an all or nothing thing? So for example, if an organization applied and requested for $500,000, could they still be funded, but maybe at a reduced amount of $350,000?
I don't want to speak for the Fatherhood grants, and I don't know, Callon, if that's come up yet in Fatherhood grants. That has happened historically with community grants. We have, because obviously the amount requested is not what we were reviewing your application, or we're reviewing it based on the merits of the program and the proposal. So we have in the past gone back to organizations and said, you're successful, but we're going to need to adjust your budget. I don't want to speak for the team this year on, their timing and ability to do that with the amount that we have. Like I said, I don't want to give advice on amounts to ask for, but I would please ask that, folks don't ask for amounts that we don't have. Please don't send us a proposal for 7 million. We have the pot of 5. So let's not give our team extra work on that one. But that has historically been a practice.
And in regards to fatherhood, like Suzanne said, we've not seen this specific situation yet pop up in the fatherhood grant space. But we are using community grants as a model for the fatherhood grants. So I would imagine it would be a similar answer. But I'll confirm that with our team and follow up with y'all after.
Okay. And then are schools eligible for the community grant or the fatherhood grant?
Yes, government organizations, local government, human resource agencies, any of those types of organizations are eligible to apply.
And they're also eligible for the fatherhood grant.
So this is another kind of technical one. So I guess there were 89 entities that had applied for the community grant last year. Do y'all know how many of those 89 were funded?
I can answer this one because I think I remember.
Callon remembers. I do not.
Dude, I will be very clear about that. But I believe that we funded 27 awards last year, and we had just under 30 million available last year in last year's cycle. So that does not mean that everybody got about a $1 million grant. It did fluctuate, based on the organizations asking, but we had a total of 189 million was asked for if you looked at the whole 89 group of dollars asked for.
For the community grant, or potentially fatherhood grant, would seniors be eligible for these funds, maybe a grandfather grant, for these funds if they meet the poverty guidelines?
Not if they would have to have minor children in the home.
Okay, but if they were a senior providing care for a minor child, potentially.
That's getting a little technical. I'll need to get with our team, Callon. I'm not sure if I don't know. I think they would probably likely have to have custody of those children, not just necessarily have them in the home. But if you will shoot me that one, Natalie, we'll get a more technical answer on how that could look. But just strictly seniors, I'll say no. We get asked a lot about senior citizen programs or things like that. If it's not a focus on the family with minor children, it's not able to be funded.
But I will make a plug for our sister agency on this one. If I can, this year in legislation, the Commission on Aging and Disability and the Department of Intellectual Disabilities merged into one agency, and I'm gonna mess up the name. So, but I think it's the Department of Aging and Disability now. And so they have some additional funding opportunities that may be a better fit for specifically the elderly population. And Natalie, I could probably connect you to my counterpart over there so that we can just see.
That would be great if you don't mind. So I'll make a note. All right. Then so thinking about the programs applying, is there a floor or a ceiling on the number of clients that individuals or organizations would need to work with in order to qualify for the grants?
No.
None for me.
Really know another way to say that other than just no.
Love it.
Sometimes it's your proposal, it's your program. whatever, however your service delivery model works. I will say, I don't know that we've ever funded anyone that only served, one person with their grant, but we don't have any rules around that.
Got it. So floor, one person, but
Yeah.
from there, sky's the limit.
So I say, I think you've got to serve somebody before we can give
got
you
it.
one of these.
Provide services somewhere. So lovely. And then, so here's another question. And this may be to both of y'all, but Callon, potentially to you. Can you please discuss the TANF priorities for the community grant? Kind of specifically interested in, how the priorities surrounding encouraging marriage and some of those purposes are kind of determined to help specifically low-income individuals through this initiative.
So, Susanna, I may kind of rely on you too. TANF has 4 authorizing principles that are established at the federal government. And so when we are looking at different grant opportunities and different organizations' needs in general, not just in the community grant process, we're looking at how do they fill the 4 principles, because that's what we are audited on as a department, and therefore that's what you will be audited on as an organization and a subcontractor. Again, we've seen, and Susanna, I don't want to get into too specific. You can look, we do have, here's my hint. We list our previous awardees in a press release on our website. So you could always go see what type of organizations got grants and kind of the work that they did. Suzanne, do you want to delve in any more? I'm not sure how far we can go into it.
Yeah. I mean, to Callon's point, those are set at the federal level, those priorities. So purposes, those 4 purposes of TANF, we don't set those. Those were set in the 1996 authorizing bill for TANF. So to what she said earlier, we do have to ensure that anything we're funding with TANF dollars meets one of those 4 purposes. They're broadly written, a lot of different things. And to Callon's point, the best way to see what could be funded is to look at who we've been able to fund in the past, and the types of work that they do. As long as it can be tied back to one of those 4 purposes, we can fund it. But that's where we get those, is from the federal statutory language, and that is what we have to meet when using those dollars, along with a whole lot of other regs that no one wants me to sit and try to get into, and I'm not even sure I know all of them. So
When you're really fun at parties, when you can just rattle off federal regulations.
rattle off federal regs. It's my party trick for sure.
Let's see here. Do y'all know about what the average size of the grant awards have been or are potentially considered to be?
I don't have that information. I will say I have seen grants that are small, small. And then I've also seen mega dollars of grant sizes. It really does depend on the organization's need. I think that's one of the really cool parts about this grant. Not that I need to sell it to you all, but I'm going to. We want to empower the organizations that are already in the community. You don't need us to come into your community as DHS and say, we can do everything. That's not the purpose of Department of Human Services, and that's not what we want to do. So we want to help you empower your community. So it really does depend.
Yeah, I would just say ditto to what Callon said. We want to fund the programs that the community knows the community needs, not what DHS knows. And I don't know an average either, but to Callon's point, with some of our different grant programs, not necessarily community grants, but we have very, very large grants. We have grants that are, $100,000, smaller even than that, amounts in the past. So it depends on what your organization is proposing and the dollars you need, the budget you've thought out to serve your folks. So it really can vary.
Perfect. And then quick clarification, bouncing back to school eligibility. For schools, do programs hang on, let me reread this question, make sure I'm asking it correctly. Okay, so for schools, would every single student in the classroom or in the school need to meet TANF requirements for those funds to be used by, as a program or for a specific classroom? Or is there, if 70% meet TANF requirements or some kind of something?
So only the students who were eligible could be served.
Okay.
So that would be on the, the school, the organization, whoever is providing the services, to show how they are separating. So, if, for example, you have other dollars coming in from private donors, things like that, you would just need to show that you're only serving TANF eligible folks with TANF dollars.
And on that note, do you all at DHS have any, sample forms or things that organizations could use in order to capture some of that eligibility information, either its income or things of that nature?
That I would have to get with our program team on. I don't believe so, because we do allow, organizations to kind of develop based on their program and what they're doing, their eligibility. Because of course you may have additional eligibility, say that you're running a fatherhood program. Well, you're obviously going to have more eligibility requirements than just the specific income, but we can check with our team on if there's any specific suggestions or things that they've offered in the past. But that is a little more in the weeds than I can probably give you, or Callon. I don't know, Callon, if you know any more.
No, that's we'll follow up with you.
Lovely. I may have. So there was a question, and I apologize if I just asked this one, where a group asked if they could provide re-granting support to participants. So they receive the funds, but if a family needed autism diagnostic services, they could provide funding directly to that family to then go receive those services, if that makes sense.
Yes, and I think this is another one we may have to follow up on the specifics of that. You can offer direct assistance. There are several rules around what types of direct assistance, direct cash financial assistance, length of time, types of services. I will also say, just because we use the example, medical services cannot be funded with TANF. So that would be something to note, that, we can't cover doctor visits or things like that with these grants.
And is there any restrictions on funding faith-based organizations?
No, we would love to have, any faith-based organization, like I said, local government, faith-based organizations, nonprofits, all are welcome.
Perfect.
Agree on fatherhood. So
Excellent. And just to reiterate, so direct cash assistance is allowable from that previous question.
It is, with let me say that with a big fat asterisk beside it. And that is something our program team can help with when they're working through it. But it is restricted. It is very specific. It's it is allowable, but there are rules around it.
Perfect.
And let me just add, I know more than anything, it is time limited. So it cannot be more than a 4-month period. So I wouldn't submit any proposal that it has a ongoing cash assistance element. That would not be allowed.
And diving back into a little bit of the weeds on previous recipients, do you know how many of your awardees kind of are typically returning organizations versus newly funded organizations?
I don't have a specific stat for you on that one. I will say, and this is kind of an elephant in the room situation right now. Suzanne and I have talked a lot about it. She alluded to it earlier. When this community grant process was first rolled out after the 2021 legislation passed, there was a really large bucket of dollars available. If some of you all remember, we had a large reserve in Tennessee of TANF dollars. So part of that spend down plan that was created dipped into the reserve bucket. We are super excited now because our reserve, our entire 700 something million dollar reserve, I think at the time it was 757, has been obligated. So there are contracts in place and organizations are spending those dollars and we are reimbursing them for their expenditures. So with the reserve being obligated, now the community grant fund is really relying on the rollover. The only way you get more dollars in the community grant bucket that I mentioned earlier is the reserve, or is the yearly award rolling into that budget. So last year we had, like I said, somewhere just under 30 million available. This year we had 5 million available. So it is growing smaller. So we've seen new applications, we've seen our new applicants, we've seen returning applicants. Everybody gets a fair shot because we want to make sure these dollars hit as all the organizations that we can.
And that's the only thing I would add is we don't give preference to, we've worked with you before, so you get an extra point on your application. There is no negative to being a new applicant. We would love to work with more folks doing, great work. And just because this is the first year you've heard about our grants does not mean you're at a disadvantage.
It's always good to know. Sometimes it feels like a crowded room occasionally.
We do distribution list and we send them emails a lot, so we can add y'all to that.
Yeah,
anyone's welcome on the listserv. So I'm going to kind of combine these questions because I think they're similar in nature. But are dollars only for programming, or could they cover housing costs? For example, would the Fatherhood grant provide assistance for dads who need housing, but then also provide parenting classes and other things for fathers and children?
Let me follow up. That's a little specific and I don't want to knock anybody out of eligibility because of an answer I give. Let me follow up and see what I can and can't say specifically about that one.
Yeah, I would agree with that. They can be used to fund multiple things. Housing is one. I'm with Callon. We'd have to double check on what exactly is allowable to be funded. And I don't want to misspeak. So we'll get back with you guys on that one.
Perfect. Fun with names. So is the Families First community grant the name of the 2-Gen community grant, or are they different?
They're the same.
They're the same. Okay.
It was just consider that 2021 bill a rebrand. So you might hear organizations in your community saying we have a 2-Gen grant, and they very well may have a 2-Gen grant that is, a longer term or still hanging around from that previous time. If someone has a community grant, it's the same dollars, same source of funds, same requirements, same rules, different name.
Perfect. And then can mixed status families be recipients if they still meet the low income requirements?
That is a little technical. I will have to get our team to give you the exact answer because it's a yes with an asterisk. So it really depends. And that one I have seen all the requirements. So I don't want to even begin to try to answer it off the fly.
Sounds good. And then do the pilot projects that were awarded 2 years ago, are they going to be reapplied for this year? Or is this the grant opportunity?
Those are not going to be reapplied for. If you mean the big $25 million pilots. If that's what you're referring to, those will not be reapplied for. They were one-time awards that, and Callon, you may want to speak to this, the legislation did extend them without any additional dollars, but they are one-time awards.
Correct. I can just add very briefly, the original legislation had a 3-year time clock on those 25 million 7 pilots. That was extended by 1 year. So now it's a 4-year clock, December 31st, 2026, I believe. And I saw my good friend CJ Butcher had joined the call. I don't know if he's still on it, but that he may have some more answers on that one.
He's always good with those details.
For sure.
And then kind of, I know we're getting close to time. So the last question, I'll just make a collective one. There was a couple questions around just the whole reimbursement process. You know, is it submitted every month? Is it done at the end of the grant? How quickly kind of is that turnaround time? So kind of in the last couple minutes, do y'all mind just kind of walking through what that reimbursement process, to the best of our ability, may look like for organizations going for either one of these grants?
So it is monthly at the end of the month for the previous month. We do, I believe the state has 60 days to reimburse. We of course try to be faster than that. I will say, I know from my experience with the bigger TOA grants, the bigger $25 million, a lot of times where things get slowed down and there become issues is when the invoices that come to us have issues, and there has to be back and forth between our invoicing team. But once those are sent to us, let's just say clean, good, ready to go, it is a fairly quick turnaround. So you would submit them monthly. And we have a dedicated invoicing team that works with agencies that receive the grants. We also offer, you know, once you're selected, we do trainings on all of these things, on invoicing, on our audits, on what you need to keep, those kind of things. So we don't just give you a grant and then say, figure it out and hope you send us the right things. We do try to offer training to be sure you know what we need and what you need and what you can expect.
And Suzanne, if I can add to that, one thing that we've recently rolled out that I think is a great opportunity for our partners, if you are selected, we have a fiscal officer specifically in our family assistance shop who will help. Sometimes when we first started talking to our grantees about it, they were like, it's Big Brother watching us and making sure and monitoring us. And really, it's a resource for our partners to see how, you know, if you were granted $100 in a year and you get to September, previously you got to the end of your grant cycle and you hadn't used all your grant and you had no idea. We'd never checked in with you throughout your grant process. Now we have rolled out an officer who will come in and work with you at different intervals throughout your grant cycle to say, hey, Callon, you've been granted $100. You're a third of the way through your grant, and you've really only spent $2. What can we do to help? Are there issues? Let's work with you on this so that you don't get to the end of your contract and you've been granted $100 and you spent total $22. We want to help you spend these dollars. So that's something that if you are selected as a grant partner, you can expect that. It's been really successful so far. And I think our current grantees would speak to the success of it.
Well, awesome. Well, I know that brings us right at time. So Callon, Suzanne, thank you all so much for taking time to meet with us, sharing about these opportunities, answering lots and lots of questions. But any last kind of closing words or words of advice?
I just want to say thank you again for all the great work that you all are doing. You know, we get to sit and tell you guys about these opportunities, but y'all are the ones out in your community serving the people who need our help, your help, all of these things. So we just really appreciate you and the hard work that you do. And I just, you know, want to say apply this year. If you're not successful, apply the next year. These grants are annual, at least on the community grant side, fingers crossed on the fatherhood side. But like I said, we just want to see you apply. We want to see, you know, hopefully you're successful. And then once you know, are successful and are a grantee of us, don't ever hesitate to reach out to the department, you know, to Callon's point, for any assistance we can do along the way. So Callon, I'll turn it over to you.
Couldn't have said it better myself. We are so excited to work with you all, whether it's this round, next round, or something that's not related to either of these two grants. We are very appreciative of your partnership. And again, I'm not shy about sharing my email. If you ever have questions, I may not be able to answer everything, but I can try. So feel free to keep that email in your inbox.
Well, thank you both again. I'll go ahead and stop recording. To